I previously made a short video using Pilot2ATC in VR in X-Plane, or to be more exact, how to set up a push-to-talk button on my controller while in VR to enable me to talk to the ATC. This was a good start, but then I had a problem with the sound. So I made another short video for those that use X-Plane to enable the sound to be controlled in such a way that I could change the sound device used once X-Plane had started. This took me closer to where I wanted to be with this ATC experience, but it still wasn't quite right. It was the sound quality. Many of my friends think the sound's just a little bit too robotic. Personally, I don't think the default Microsoft voices are that bad. And having flown online with ATC services a couple of times, I think the voices are easier to understand from Microsoft than some of the controllers I've come across online. No, my issue was the voices sounded too good. They just didn't sound like radio voices. Here are a couple of examples of what ATC sounds like from Pilot2ATC.
Say tower frequency at Kilo Delta Foxtrot Whiskey for Skyways 157. Say ground frequency for Skyways 157.
But I really wanted something that sounded more like it came from a radio. Something like this.
Say tower frequency at Kilo Delta Foxtrot Whiskey for Skyways 157. Say departure frequency for Skyways 157.
So in this video, I will show you how to set this up. Oh, one last thing. I had a limited budget. In fact, no budget. So I needed to do this with free software. The first thing we need for the sound is to get the software. If you watched the previous video, you will have seen or even downloaded Voicemeeter Banana. You can continue with that or use the potato version I am. It really doesn't matter for this case. Both versions do the same thing. It's just potato has more channels for mixing. The downloads are listed in the show notes below. From the same site, you will also need a virtual cable. You get one for free. Just download here. And for a small donation, you get 2 additional ones. And even if you don't need them, it's worth supporting the developer anyway. Installation is simple. Just click and install the voice meter of your choice and the virtual cable or cables. Once installed, run the voice meter program and I'll go through the basics. So, working from left to right, the first section is the mixer for physical devices plugged into the PC and the virtual sound cables which can be attached to applications. For those new to all this, and I guess that's everyone who's watching this video, as that's the whole point of it, sounds a bit daunting, but don't worry, it's not. So this first input here, I'm going to use for the microphone on my Rift. By left clicking on the name, a drop down menu appears with all your devices. And you'll notice that there's 2 versions of each device. One prefixed with WDM and one prefixed with MME. For this session, I'm going to use WDM. If you experience problems, just try using MME instead. Therefore, I'm going to select WDM Rift Audio and enter. I can also change the label name by right clicking on the name and typing in something useful like Rift Mic. Enter. I can now do this for other devices. So in my case, I have a studio mic, that's the iRig here. Left click and select iRig. There's a mic in my webcam, which I'm going to select on here. And these three are real devices. Now for the next input, I've already put the label Pilot2ATC, and if I click on the name to see the device, you can see I've chosen a virtual cable. In my case, I paid for the 2 additional ones, so I've used cable A, but it's your choice. You can use cable A, cable B, or the default cable on its own. And I'll select that, and I'll show you in a minute how to connect Pilot2ATC to this mixer. And this one here, I have a test cable, and if I left click, you'll see that this is the standard cable, different one, which I'm going to use for test purposes later on. So I've got 3 real devices and 2 cables on my mixer. The next section is in effect 3 virtual sound cards. These sound cards are called voice meter VAIO, voice meter aux, and VAIO3. Note, if you're using the banana version of voice meter, you'll only have 3 mixers on the left and 2 in this section. There's nothing to do here, on the setup that is, other than to label them. So in my case, I have put Teamspeak, and I'm going to use Teamspeak on this mixer. That's the inbound audio on Teamspeak chat. And I've got Windows set up to use this mixer. Now to set Windows up to use this virtual sound card, I right click on the speaker icon in the bottom right hand side of my toolbar, and I select the sounds, and this will give me this pop-up. And here I'm going to set the default sound card to use for Windows playback. So if I go to playback and scroll down, at the bottom you can see I've got voice meter VAIO3 input set as default. So I just click on that and press set as default. So that is now going to route all my Windows sounds to this mixer. If I want to send it to this mixer, I would just select voice meter set as default, and now the Windows sounds are going to come in on this virtual sound card. But for my setup, I'm using number 3. And click OK. So we've dealt with all the inputs now. These on the left hand side are the physical inputs. These in the center are the virtual sound cards. And now we need to deal with the outputs. Where am I going to listen to all this audio? So on my setup, I've got the speakers on the PC, I've got the Rift headset, and I've also got the LG 4K TV I use as a monitor. And those are these 3 inputs here, A1, A2 and A3. To label these sliders, you right click on the slider itself. So let's go to an empty one here. So if I right click on the slider itself and type something, you'll see that this slider is now labeled tests. I want this blank, so I'll just put a point in. So I've labeled this one speakers, this one Rift, and this one LG TV. How do I assign A1, A2 and A3 to be those speakers, output devices, etc.? Well, that's these 3 buttons up the top. So if I go to A1 in the drop down list, you can see this is set to be my speakers. A2 is set to be the Rift headset, and A3 is set to be the LG TV. So those are 3 physical devices I have. And then at the end, stay with me. I know it's a little bit confusing, but just stay with me at the moment. We have virtual outputs, and I'm going to come back to those a little bit later when we look at the Pilot2ATC microphone and the Teamspeak microphone. I will show you these in a little bit. For the moment, let's deal with the basic sounds. So if you followed everything, we're now ready to start testing. If not, pause the video, go back and set up your microphones here and set Pilot2ATC to use one of your sound cables, and set Windows to use one of the mixers in this section. Okay, so let's run a quick test. So I'm going to go off to YouTube and we'll play a video. And at the moment I can't hear anything, but if you look here in the Windows output, or the Windows sound card that's being used at the moment, I've got audio, but I can't hear anything on my speakers. That's because I need to punch this output through to where I want the sound delivered to. If I want it delivered to the desktop speakers, which are on A1, I punch it to A1. And it's now coming through the speakers. If I want it to go to the Rift headset, I punch A2. And if I want it to go to the TV, I punch A3. If I punch that, it's going to the TV and the speakers, and now it's going to all three devices. That's pretty neat, isn't it? And of course I can control the volume. Here's the master control for Windows, and here's the volume for each of these, so I can have it playing quieter on the speakers, louder in the headset, etc, etc. It also means that when I start up X-Plane, it's going to use the default sound device, which is this sound card here, and I can switch the output from the speakers to the Rift headset just by going from A1 to A2. So I don't have to stop X-Plane, change the speaker, restart X-Plane just to switch the audio output. I can do it very simply within Voicemeeter. Okay, now it's time to set up Pilot2ATC to use this sound mixer, and I also need to set up the microphone, so I might as well do that now. Back again to sounds, Windows sounds that is, so right click on the speaker on the bottom right hand side of your toolbar and select sounds. We looked at this earlier, let's drag it onto the screen. We've already looked at the playback where we set the default to be the Voicemeeter. Now we need to go to recordings and we need to set the Voicemeeter output VIO 3. In my case, let's go back to my Voicemeeter so you can see that. This is this microphone, VIO 3, 2 and 1. So back to sounds. If I select this as the default device, the microphone it's going to be listening to is this one, which is why I've labelled it Pilot2ATC mic. If I make it this one, it'll be here, and the aux output is this one. Really simple. So I do that for my recordings. Okay. Now Pilot2ATC. Let's go into the config and we'll see under speech the sound device output. I'm using cable A. I know it says cable A input because it's an input into Voicemeeter. It's an output from Pilot2ATC going into Voicemeeter. So that's why I've selected that in the drop down list. Obviously, if you've got cable A and B, you can choose either one of those. If you've just got the default cable, then you would use the cable input one there. But I'm going to use A. And config. And that really is it. When I'm using Pilot2ATC now, my Pilot2ATC voices are going to be coming in on this channel here. If I want to listen to it on the speakers, I punch it to A1. If I want to listen to it on the Rift headset, I punch A2. And if I want to punch it through to the TV, I press A3. So this is the playback from Pilot2ATC. A1, A2 or A3. Or all three. So the sound is now being delivered everywhere. So how about the Pilot2ATC microphone? Well, we have the Rift microphone, which we set up on this column here. Remember, left click, I selected the Rift audio, the Rift microphone here, and I've turned the volume right down at the moment because I'm talking, but if I move this up to 0 dBs, by the way, quickly move this up and down, just double click on it and it'll go to 0. So you can see my Rift microphone is being picked up at the moment. The Rift microphone isn't being delivered anywhere. There's no punch through. I want the Rift microphone to go to this output here, the Pilot2ATC mic. Remember, this is the default mic used by Windows. I set it up, and that is B3. So if I click B3, you'll see my voice going up and down here, and when I press B3, the voice is now going up and down here. So that is the voice going in to Pilot2ATC. So output from Pilot2ATC on this column, punch it through to where I want. Which microphone do I want to use with Pilot2ATC? If you don't want to use the Rift microphone and use your own, put your own microphone on one of these inputs. And that's how I control sound in and out of Pilot2ATC. The next step is to change that sound so it sounds more like a radio sound coming out of Pilot2ATC, and we'll discuss that now. So now it's time to set up the sound effect on the Pilot2ATC audio only to sound like it's on a radio. For this we're going to use an equalizer. I need to download that equalizer. Another piece of free software, and you can get it from SourceForge, and it's called Equalizer APO. Go here, click download and run the install. When the install's finished, it will either start the configurator or you will have to reboot your machine and then the configurator will start. If it doesn't, if you go to your start menu under recently added in Windows Start menu, you will see the configurator, and when you run the configurator you will see this. Now I've already set this up. You only have to do this once, by the way. You don't have to do this every time you start up. Once the filters are being set up, there's nothing to do. It's set up once and for all. I'm only going to run the filter, in my case, on cable A. That's because if I slide my voice meter over, that cable A was what I was using for Pilot2ATC. So we tick this because we're going to put the equalizer on this cable, and that's all. We're not going to touch anything else. Click that, close, and like I said, you may have to reboot your machine. Once you've rebooted the machine, all you have to do is set the equalizer up. And if I go into recently added programs or Windows Start and Configuration Editor, when the configuration editor runs, you will see this API. Just ignore it, say no. I don't know what that is, I haven't wrote it out. We're going to do some graphic equalization on cable A. You choose your playback devices. I'm doing it on cable A. I don't need any preamplification. I don't need to do anything here. All I did was move the bottom end audio down 1K. I heightened it a little bit. Just play around with this and get a sound that you like. I think this sounds pretty much like a radio. This is what it sounds like.
Say tower frequency at Kilo Delta Foxtrot Whiskey for Skyways 157.
And that's it. Once you've set this up, close this. You will never have to touch this again. You will never have to run the configurator. Your Pilot2ATC will be going on to cable A. Cable A will have that equalization already configured, and it will sound amazing. And that's how we do sound on Pilot2ATC. And finally, in this part of the video, I'm going to show you how I've set up Teamspeak. So if you remember rightly, I said I was going to use Teamspeak on this virtual sound card here. That is the inbound audio from Teamspeak, and the Teamspeak microphone I've set up on this one here. So how did I do this? Well, open up Teamspeak, go to Tools and Options, and in here, well, the first thing we're going to look at is the playback device. And you can see here my playback device is the voice meter aux input. That is this one here, which is why I labeled it Teamspeak. And if I press play test sound, you'll see I've got audio coming in on this mixer. Can't hear it anywhere yet at the moment because it's not punched through. If I want to listen to it on the speakers, I hit that. If I want to listen to it on the Rift, obviously I press A2. So that deals with the inbound audio. The microphone I want to use for Teamspeak, well, let's go to Capture, and you can see I've got it set for the voice meter output VB audio. That is this first mixer here, which is why I've labeled it TS microphone. And if I want to test this is working, well, which microphone do I want to use? If you look at my voice meter, you can see I've got 3 microphones. I've got the Rift microphone, the iRig microphone, and the webcam. And I can choose which microphone to use. If we'll use the webcam mic, I'll punch this up to 0 dBs, so you can see my voice going up and down, and I'm going to punch this through to the TS mic, which is B1. So I press B1. Now when I talk, the webcam microphone is picking it up, and it's going to this one here. If I press the begin test button in Teamspeak, I should now see the Teamspeak going up and down. It's testing, it's working. Obviously if I turn that off, we've got no audio coming in here and it's not working. And that's the setup. Very easy. Why do I do this? Well, when I'm flying online, I tend to have the X-plane audio going to the desktop speakers, and I have Pilot2ATC punched through to my Rift headset, and I have the Rift microphone, turn that down, I have the Rift microphone going through to B1, which is the Teamspeak microphone, and the Pilot2ATC microphone as well. So I'm getting X-plane noise through the desktop speaker, and I'm getting the audio from Teamspeak and the audio from Pilot2ATC coming through my headset. The Pilot2ATC audio will have that filter on it, so it sounds like a radio, but the Teamspeak audio is unfiltered, and that will be coming through to my Rift headset as plain audio. And of course, if I want to stop using Teamspeak or I want to mute it, I can do that all from this control panel. Hope you find that useful.